Hey guys! Tonight we're headed somewhere thick with heat, history, and just a whiff of mysterious wax. Imagine walking through the heart of the Mughal Empire, maybe in Agra or Lahore, where the air is so warm it holds the smell of everything spices, sweat, fresh ink, and the slow-burning drip of candles no one ever really sees being made. You're on a stone street right now, boots slapping the ground that's older than your family tree. All around you, tight little stalls with bolts of silk, monkey thieves darting past cobblers, and vendors waving peacock feathers over carts of jackfruit. But tonight's not about mangoes or Mughal fashion. It's about a strange little trick that let couriers sniff their way through state secrets. Yes, sniff, like an imperial bloodhound in a fancy turban. Because at the height of the Mughal Empire, back when emperors were sun-lounging on jewel-encrusted thrones and debating poetry with their generals, someone got clever, very clever. They figured out that if you burn the right candle while sealing a message, say, one scented with clove, rose, or cinnamon, the scroll would carry that scent like a perfume. Only couriers trained to detect those exact smells would know whether the message was legit or a dangerous fake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're watching a man now early 30s, lean, sun-baked, and moving with that alert energy that says, I deliver messages for a living and sleep with one eye open. His name is Myrrh, and he's a mid-level courier, not high enough to get wine from the emperor's cellar, but not low enough to carry laundry orders either. He's on his way to pick up a scroll from the mint in Agra, and as he walks, he's sniffing, not in a suspicious way, more like someone trying to remember a dream they almost forgot. Smoke drifts lazily above rooftops, curling into the amber sky. Some comes from cooking pots, some from temple offerings, but some, as our knows, comes from the narrow chimneys of the message quarter, where official wax is melted and sealed into packets too important to ever be opened by mistake. Each district has its own signature blend. Clove smoke means revenue documents. Cardamom means diplomatic letters. The strongest one, sharp as lightning up the nose, is asafoetida, reserved for military orders. If you've never smelled asafoetida, congratulations! It's like sulfur and regret made a baby, but in candle form. It becomes a perfect security tag. No one mistakes that stench. Myrrh turns a corner and sniffs again. Something isn't right. The scroll he's supposed to collect today, Revenue Dispatch, from Lahore. It should smell faintly of roasted clove and jaggery, but the air's all wrong. There's something minty hanging behind the smoke, and not the pleasant kind. More like a dental herb garden was set on fire. He steps into the pickup stall, a windowless cove of wax strips and low oil lamps, and raises a brow at the young clerk inside. New formula, he asks casually. The clerk shrugs too quickly. Same as always. But Myrrh's nose twitches, and in this empire, a twitchy nose can get you arrested. See, the Mughals didn't trust wax seals alone. Wax could be forged, melted, remade, but sent. That was nearly impossible to replicate unless you knew the exact mixture, and even then, it clung differently to different parchment types. The candle smoke would permeate the scroll, the case, sometimes even the courier's clothing. If the wrong scent showed up at the palace gate, heads would roll, literally. Not just the couriers either. Sometimes the clerk, the waxmaker, and anyone else within 10 arm lengths of the scroll. That's why Myrrh hesitates. He knows this minty note isn't part of the blend. His teacher once told him, if it smells like medicine, walk away like it's poison, which it might actually be. Still, he accepts the scroll with a nod, takes one final inhale, and steps back out. He'll double-check it tonight under moonlight and charcoal before riding north. Historians still argue whether this system, this whole scented candle surveillance network, was deliberate genius or just a happy accident by neurotic scribes who liked their scrolls smelling fancy. One camp says it was intentional, a tightly guarded olfactory code. Another says it evolved slowly, as different districts added signature oils to make scrolls stand out, then security adapted around it. Either way, by the time Majar enters the stables to prep his ride, the candle code has become a real thing. He'll stop twice along the route to verify the scent, once by torchlight in Mathura, and once under a banyan tree by an old fort where every courier seems to hear whispers but no one dares investigate. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Tonight, you just need to remember this. When a Mughal message mattered, it wasn't just stamped and sealed. It was smoked, scented, and sealed by scent. And the people who could tell one formula from another, they weren't poets or generals. They were candle guys and mail runners who knew how to trust their noses. Now, close your eyes and picture a slow curl of smoke rising over rooftops. Somewhere in it is a scent that says urgent. You don't know it yet, but that scent could stop a war. You follow Mazar now, just a step behind his worn leather sandals. As he veers off the busy street and slips into a long sandstone corridor, the walls narrow. The sounds of the market fade. No more donkeys yelling. No flute from the snake charmer. Just your own breath and the faintest scratch of wax on wood. This is the palace archive wing, and you're about to meet the paper trail that ran an empire. It's cool in here. Somehow, thick walls keep the heat out. Candles glow low and orange, and the whole place smells like old ink and, oddly enough, burnt sugar. Some clerk probably spilled syrup on the record books a decade ago, and now it just lives here. Mughal filing systems were advanced for their time. Scrolls, arranged by topic, district, urgency, and scent, but not officially. Of course, that's where things get strange. You duck past a curtain of pearl strings, because why not have a little luxury between bureaucratic cubicles, and enter a chamber where 4 record keepers sit cross-legged, elbows deep in bundles of parchment tied in colored thread. Every thread color means something. Green for agriculture, blue for sea trade, black for court complaints, which is almost poetic, honestly. But no one here relies on eyes alone. You notice it when a clerk unties a scroll, lifts it halfway to his nose, and inhales. Deep, like someone remembering an old lover or checking if the milk's gone bad. A tiny nod. He tucks it into a wooden box labeled urgent, verified. You try to peek in. The script is so tight and neat it looks printed, and it carries a faint smell, maybe sandalwood, maybe toasted nutmeg. That's the trick of this whole system. You think you know what you're smelling, but unless your nose has been trained, you'll miss the slight variations. Jasmine with clove means imperial taxes. Jasmine with cardamom, temple finances. One clerk once got them confused and caused an entire week's delay in monastic funding. Monks weren't thrilled. Now, technically, none of this scent verification is documented as law, but it's deeply embedded in practice. Everyone knows a scroll's smell is just as important as its seal. And this brings us to the scribes. The royal scribes didn't just copy text. They composed scrolls on paper pre-treated with wax-infused brushes. A scribe might dip the tail of his quill in rose oil before writing the opening salutation. Not to make the letter smell nice, but so that every courier who came in contact with it knew this message came from the central treasury. Because the rose oil, that was treasury only. The formula was stored in a clay jar guarded by 2 eunuchs who, rumor says, once beat a perfumer unconscious for sniffing it too long. Historians still argue whether this scent-tiered system started with Akbar the Great, or whether it evolved later during Shah Jahan's reign, when things got fancier and security grew tighter. There's even a fringe theory that one of the royal wives suggested the scent coding after receiving a stinky letter from her brother-in-law and refusing to read it. That story's mostly legend, but it is true that certain harem correspondents used unique oils, musk for the emperor's favorites, mint for formal letters from the wives to foreign queens. The gender politics of scented ink. Oh yes, you're neck deep in it now. Back in the archive wing, you pause near a low table covered in brass inkwells and candle stumps. These aren't normal candles. You recognize that immediately. Their wax is cloudy. One has whole cloves floating inside it. Another smells faintly of burnt fennel seed. They're not for lighting the room. They're for sealing messages and, crucially, for marking scent onto the parchment like a signature. Once the message is written, a clerk lights the correct candle, lets it burn for precisely 21 seconds, and then holds the scroll in the smoke. The wax melts slightly. The paper warms, and the scent lingers sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks if the blend is right. One courier once claimed to detect the scent of mace powder on a dispatch that had traveled all the way from Kabul in a saddlebag full of rice. Of course, the rice probably helped preserve it. Unintended bonus. Someone should have written that down. A young apprentice in the corner sneezes. His supervisor rolls his eyes. Still can't handle ginger wax, he mutters. That one's used for grain tax decrees. It's sharp. It gets up into your sinuses and unpacks its bags. You walk along the wall and see storage cubbies stacked floor to ceiling. Some are labeled in Persian, others in old Hindustani script. One is marked only by a nose icon, a joke. Maybe, or maybe just a nod to the unspeakable rule of this whole place. If it doesn't smell right, it doesn't leave the palace. And here's something odd. Some messages aren't even opened when received. Instead, the courier brings them, holds them under the nose of a gatekeeper, sometimes the vizier himself. And that man just breathes in. One sniff, two, then a nod. Yes, this is from Mir Jafar. That's all it takes. The scent is proof. Sure, it sounds ridiculous now, but think of it like early biometric ID. Before fingerprints, before barcodes, before retinal scans, you had the candle blend. One historian called it nose-led governance. Another dismissed it as aromatic paranoia. But the couriers, they swore by it, still do. In quiet corners of Punjab and Kashmir, where an old postmaster might tell you, with a wink, that a real letter should smell like trust. And as you leave the archive, one last detail catches your attention. A list, tacked to the wall beside the ink shelf. It's in fading script, titled Scent Guide for Verification. You only catch a few lines. Clove equals revenue office. Cardamom is some diplomatic dispatch. Ginger equals grain tax. Fennel equals local trade licenses. Musk equals susok imperial household. There are more, many more. But before you can keep reading, a low bell rings in the distance. Mazar's horse is ready, and the scroll in his satchel smells exactly like it should. For now, you're walking beside Mazar again now. Early morning fog threading through the alleyways as the first slant of sunlight bleeds gold onto the broken tiles. The scroll in his satchel burned, scented, and sealed rests against his side like a sleeping cat. But you don't head to the stables, not yet. First, Mazar has to make a detour, because while most people think of couriers as men who simply ride hard and deliver faster, the truth is they had to understand the message before it was ever read. Not the content, no, never. The words, but the signals, the clues, the invisible stamps, which brings you to a back room in the government compound, the candle chamber. It's a small, windowless space, no bigger than a pantry, with soot-stained walls and shelves upon shelves of tiny clay pots. Each holds a hardened puddle of wax. Some are spiked with whole spices, others streaked with oily threads of resin or crushed petals. This is where it begins. The candle code. Mazar nods to the wax tender, an old man named Harun whose eyebrows are larger than his mouth. Harun grumbles something incomprehensible, maybe a greetings, maybe a threat, and then picks up a pot labeled in chalk with the glyph for clove. He stirs it, sniffs it, frowns. Too weak, he mutters. Then he opens another jar. The smell hits you immediately warm, sweet, and oddly meaty. You'd never guess that clove, when burned with a dash of powdered neem bark, turns from sweet spice into something more musky. A scent that clings to paper like guilt on a thief. Harun spoons out a lump of this strange wax, presses it into a shallow brass mold, and lights a taper. The flame dances blue at the base. As the wax melts, it releases smoke in slow spirals. This is where things get interesting. See, the Mughals didn't just rely on what the candle was made of. They also timed the burn. Short burn, urgent message. Long burn, safe for slow transport. Midway through the burn, the scent changes. That's the mark. A real courier knows to smell not just the first impression, but the second phase of the smoke, like how perfume has a top note and a dry down. Yes, the Mughals basically invented bureaucratic fragrance layering. Harun, holding the candle stub with a steady hand, dips a parchment scrap into the smoke. It curls slightly, the edges browning, but the scroll doesn't catch. Just a warm wisp of scent-infused vapor sinking in. 15 seconds, Harun mutters. That's the sweet spot. Historians still argue whether this level of olfactory signaling was systemized or just tradition passed down orally. There are no official manuals, no candle codex buried in some imperial vault, but every seasoned courier knew the smell of a properly smoked dispatch. The fringe crowd. They believe each region had its own version of the scent code. Lahore leaned floral. Gujarat preferred resinous blends. Delhi was all spice and musk. And somewhere, supposedly, was a master list with all the recipes. If it ever existed, it's long gone. Or maybe locked in someone's spice cabinet, forgotten under sacks of coriander. Mazahar tests the smoke by running his fingers through it and then sniffing the tips. Clove, definitely, he says, and something sharper, ajwain. Harun grunts. You've got a better nose than the prince's perfumer. And that wasn't hyperbole. Candle formulation was a high art. Some of the empire's best noses weren't in the harem, they were down here, toiling among pots of what looked like mashed turmeric and tree sap. There's a legend only half believed that one formula was so potent, it gave away state secrets just by being sniffed. Smelled like victory and betrayal all at once. They say it was used once, in the war against the Deccan rebels, and then banned forever, supposedly made people weep without knowing why. You shake your head, myths or not. There's clearly a method to this madness. Mazar selects a fresh strip of parchment from the corner table, rolls it gently, and dips it in the candle's smoke, turning it like a skewer over a campfire. The wax clings for just a second, then fades. The scent settles in. He gives one last nod, pockets it, and finally heads for the stables. But here's something else no one tells you. This whole scented smoke system, it wasn't just about security. It was a language, a quiet, coded one. An elite courier like Mazar could sniff a letter and tell you who wrote it, where it came from, whether it was forged, whether it was late, whether it had been tampered with mid-route. In one case, a courier noticed the scent was off by half a peppercorn, as he described it and refused to deliver. The letter had been opened, resealed, and reburned using the wrong wax blend. That tiny mistake exposed a court conspiracy. The courier got a promotion. The clerk who opened the original scrolls vanished. And lest you think this was just some overblown olfactory theater, consider this. The empire covered millions of square kilometers. Terrain varied. Roads disappeared. Literacy wasn't universal, but every courier could be trained to detect a handful of base scents, making the candle smoke system a low-tech but incredibly reliable authentication network. Some waxes were so rare, they had to be imported from coastal ports like the resin used in dragon's tongue wax, a deep red formula that only accompanied trade deals with the Ottoman Empire. You didn't dare forge that. One whiff, and your head was on a stick. Harun blows out the candle. The smoke curls lazily upward, then disappears like a thought you almost remembered. You follow Mazhar to the stables now. His satchel is heavier, not because of the scroll, but because of the responsibility it now carries. You don't tamper with scented parchment, not unless you're ready to play chess with your life. The horse stomps gently as he mounts. The sky has turned the color of melted bronze, and the smell of the morning is shifting. Less spice, more dust. But deep in Mazhar's satchel, something still lingers. That smoky clove wax warmth. The candle code has done its job. For now. The sun's higher now, and you're on horseback with Mazhar, clopping steadily along a narrow dirt road that winds between rice fields and tamarind groves. It's humid. The kind of heat that makes your clothes cling like a second, sweatier skin. Insects hum like tiny violins. And overhead, a pair of hawks trace slow circles in the sky. Mazhar doesn't talk much when he rides. You've noticed that. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's the weight of the scroll pressed against his ribs. Still warm from the candle smoke. The scent's faint now, buried under leather and dust. But it's there. Clove with a bitter tail of ajwain, just enough to make his nose twitch if he thinks too hard. But this part of the job, this is when the scent proves its worth. Every courier, especially one riding cross-province, had checkpoints, places to stop, rest, water the horse, and, more importantly, confirm that the message they carried was still real. You reach the first checkpoint around midday. a shade-cloaked rest stop outside Mathura, surrounded by neem trees and guarded by an elderly woman named Bibi Sharda. Don't be fooled by the hunched spine or soft bangles she used to write messages herself. Back when her beard was black and her knees worked, she greets Majar with a grunt, then waves a brass censer over the satchel. The scroll stays inside. She doesn't open it. Instead, she lights a match, sets a lump of control wax aflame clove base, like the original blend, and holds her hand near the opening of the bag. The trick: if the scroll has been swapped, the scents won't harmonize. They'll fight. One will overpower the other, or twist sideways into something sour. Bibi Sharda closes her eyes, lets the smoke from both sources mingle, then exhales. Still clean, she says, but faint. You riding too hard. Monsoon's coming. Mazar replies, I want to cross the Chambal before it floods. She nods, throws sand on the candle stub, and hands him a bite of dried tamarind. Keep your nose sharp, son. You ride on. Historians still argue whether checkpoints like these had official recognition or were informal courier guild traditions. There's no royal decree describing them, yet they appear in personal journals, trade records, even poetry. One 17th century poet wrote about the scent guardians who sniffed out lies with smoke and spice, maybe romanticized, maybe real, but the checkpoints worked. They kept forgeries out and loyalty strong. By dusk, you reach the banyan tree. It's massive, the kind of tree that looks like it remembers things. Its roots reach down like fingers trying to reclaim the earth. Beneath it waits a small iron brazier, left behind by the last courier, still warm. This is the second test, the secret one. The message doesn't leave the satchel here. Instead, Mazar unpacks a tiny bundle from his belt, a linen-wrapped strip of parchment that's blank. Except for a whisper of wax scent, it's his tester. He lights the brazier, places both the tester and the satchel scroll near it, and lets the heat coax the scents upward. Then he sniffs. One. Then the other. Still matched. But this moment is fragile. Anything could go wrong here. Humidity, temperature, road dust. A sweaty saddlebag can change a wax's dry down, turning cinnamon sharp or making musk smell muddy. If even a single note is off, Mazar will have to turn back or burn the scroll entirely. It's happened before. There's a case in the archives about a courier who passed 4 checkpoints with a letter that almost smelled right until the final sniff revealed a trace of rose instead of saffron. That one switch meant it was a counterfeit peace treaty. If he delivered it, the emperor would have been assassinated within the week. Instead, the courier sniffed, paused, and handed the scroll to the nearest guard with the phrase, "This one speaks treason." The guard beheaded the forger by sundown. No pressure, right? Mazar finishes the second check. Still good. He lets the tester burn, wipes soot from his fingers, and drinks from a nearby spring that smells like wet rocks and old copper. You close your eyes for a second, and behind your eyelids, the world spins slow and golden, like the inside of a clove pod. Here's something quirky. Some couriers kept little vials of competing scents tied around their necks. Not for perfume, but to clear their nose. If you sniff musk all day, your brain stops recognizing it, so you give it a break. Take a deep inhale of raw vinegar or crushed coriander. Reset the senses. The Mughal version of palate cleansing. Only with your face. By the time night falls, you're on the road again, winding through scrubland lit only by moonlight and fireflies. Somewhere in the dark, wolves howl. Somewhere else, a campfire crackles and someone plays a mournful flute. But Majar keeps riding. He knows the scroll in his satchel isn't just paper. It's weight. It's proof. It's a line of trust running through forests and fields, held together not by string or wax seals, but by scent. The empire may not write it down. The scholars may not agree. But every mile you ride proves the same truth over and over. If it smells right, it probably is. And if it doesn't, you'd better turn around. You wake to hooves splashing through a shallow stream just before dawn, your spine aching from the stiff ride and the scroll in Majar's satchel still tucked snugly under his arm like a sleeping baby that might explode if jostled. The fog is thicker now, cool, quiet. full of secrets. The world around you is half-formed, and every tree root looks like it could tell you a story. Mazar nudges the horse up a rocky incline, and ahead, barely visible through the mist, sits a collection of low canvas tents pitched in a circle. No flags, no guards, just the faint scent of something woody in the air. This is one of the Mughal Empire's strangest secrets, the training grounds for the noses. You didn't think sniffing scrolls was a born talent, did you? No, this art was taught. You're about to see how Mazar dismounts and hands his reins to a boy no older than 12. The boy immediately cups a small ceramic pot to his nose and breathes in. A standard check. Even the horse has to pass the sniff test. You're guided toward the main tent. Inside, the air is heavy, really heavy. Not just warm, but thick with competing smells. Dried lavender, melting pine resin, something acrid like old socks but sharper. You gag slightly. Mazar doesn't. In the corner, 4 recruits sit blindfolded. They're inhaling from tiny pots, one after the other, then writing on slates what they smell. Not what they think they smell, what the candle says. They have to distinguish between wax melted with clove oil aged in Agra and clove oil aged in Lahore, between saffron smoked at low heat and saffron scorched by accident. It's like trying to identify who made a curry just by smelling the spoon. One of the trainers walks over. She's wearing a robe stained with wax blotches, and her fingers smell like burnt sugar and old ink. Fresh nose. She asks Mazar, pointing to you. He shakes his head. Observer. Pity. She grunts. We could use another pair of nostrils. You sit at the back of the tent while a lesson unfolds. Lesson 5. She says to the blindfolded students, "You're in the capital. You receive a scroll with cinnamon. What does it mean?" A boy raises his hand. Military command. Wrong. She snaps. Cinnamon is northern frontier supply. Command is cinnamon with black pepper. Another pot. This one. Silence. One student hesitates. Coriander. Incorrect. It's burned coriander. Smells of coal, doesn't it? That's because it was misprocessed, and now you've missed the scent cue. Imagine what that means for an army that's waiting on rations. The students nod, taking notes by smell. Historians still argue whether these nose camps were widespread or elite. Some claim they only existed for palace couriers. Others insist regional governors trained their own teams. There's even a controversial theory that harem women were trained as secret sniffers, using scented fans to verify letters before they reach the emperor. Here's a quirky tidbit. One training exercise involved using animal dung to mask a scent, forcing the courier to identify it anyway. They called it the dung veil. The smell was horrifying. The skill, priceless, because sometimes enemy forces would tamper with scrolls by fumigating them. Or worse, storing them in barrels of fish guts to confuse the scent. You don't just need a good nose, you need a brave one. A bell rings, soft and hollow. Time for the final test of the day. The students file out to the central clearing, where a dozen candles are lit and arranged in a grid. No labels, no cues. One by one, each student walks past, inhales, and whispers a phrase. This one is saffron mixed with ghee, or this one is rose, but overcooked. If they get even one wrong, they lose their scent log. Start from scratch. Memory is everything. And here's the hardest part. Scents change. Wax ages. Oils oxidize. A scroll sealed 2 days ago will smell different from the same formula sealed yesterday. So the students have to remember not only the scent, but its time signature. Mazar leans over to you. The nose remembers, but only if you treat it well. It's not just a poetic line. Couriers kept diets low in onions and garlic. They avoided smoking. Some even fasted for 2 days before big assignments to clear their systems. One chronicler describes a courier who stuffed crushed basil leaves in his nostrils during sleep to keep his sinuses awake. That one's probably exaggerated. Hopefully, after sunset, the camp grows quiet. The students rest in hammocks soaked in rosewater, meant to reset the palate overnight. Insects chirp like off-key flutes. You lie on a mat outside Mazar's tent, staring at the sky. Above, the stars blur through a slow-moving veil of smoke. Someone still testing blends for a new dispatch. You breathe in faint pine, a little cardamom, a whisper of iron. Somewhere, someone's making a message, and someone else is learning how to recognize it just by the way the smoke kisses the night air. You wake up to the scent of something. Rich, sweet, spicy, a little oily. Your brain takes a moment to place it, Rose. Maybe, no, clove again. Not quite. You sit up, rubbing the crust from your eyes, and realize you're surrounded by dozens of tiny clay pots, each with a sliver of candle burning low. The smell swirls in layers too many to count, and your nose, frankly, gives up. Welcome to the perfumer's tent. Mazar's already inside, sitting cross-legged beside a broad-shouldered man in a green linen tunic. This is Arif, the Empire's scent master for the Northern District. He doesn't make perfume in the way you might expect. No luxury bottles or glass vials. No dainty dabbing on royal wrists. Arif makes scent codes. His clients, the Empire's messengers. His purpose: confuse everyone except them. He greets you with a grin and a stained thumb, waving you over without standing. Around him are low wooden trays stacked with dried spices, fruit peels, flower petals, and mysterious blackened lumps that could be tree resin or extremely confident raisins. He picks up a wax mold and gently presses a scrap of bark into it. Cinnamon, he says, casually, but only the second boiling. The first batch is too sharp. This one's quieter, more reliable, used for minor tax scrolls in the upper plains. Mazahar nods like this makes total sense. You just blink. Arif chuckles. You can't have the wrong scent start a war, eh? And that's exactly the point. Each scent blend has to walk a very narrow path, distinct enough to be identified by trained noses, but not so strong that it masks the parchment underneath. The smell has to live on the scroll, not suffocate it. He lifts another candle and lights it. It sputters, then burns with a thick, lazy smoke. This one's rose and myrrh, he says, means imperial correspondence, usually between high-ranking wives. You lean in. It smells divine, warm and floral. With a backbone like leather and firewood, if you bottled it, you'd probably make a fortune. But Arif shrugs. No good for long-distance travel. The myrrh fades in 3 days. That's one of the biggest challenges. Scents change. Oils break down. Transporting a scroll from Delhi to Kashmir could take a week. If the scent was poorly blended, the signature would vanish or worse, morph into something misleading. Historians still argue whether the Mughals developed their scent formulations in-house or borrowed techniques from Persian apothecaries. There's evidence of crossover. Persian scrolls carry their own scent codes, especially in the Safavid courts. But the Mughal Empire took the practice further, industrializing it with regional scent masters and codified blends for every major office. A quirky aside, some perfumers used crushed gemstones in their wax, not for fragrance, just to add shimmer and texture that would catch on the scroll's fibers. Like a scented fingerprint, the sapphire powder didn't smell like anything, but under torchlight, it would sparkle in a way only a trained courier would expect. Arif shows you a scroll from his private archive, an old, yellowed piece of parchment rolled tightly and sealed in hardened wax that smells like lemon rind and beeswax. This, he says, was used only once. During a plague outbreak, medical orders had to smell clean, trustworthy. No musk, no spice, just citrus and calm. Mazar leans in. I remember that blend. Burned my throat when we first tested it. Too much camphor, Arif mutters. Nearly knocked the governor's assistant unconscious. They laugh. You tried to, but you're still wrapping your head around the idea that a scroll can smell like authority. Here's another weird truth. In some rare cases, perfumers used negative scent logic. That means instead of giving a scroll a unique scent, they gave it none at all and trained the couriers to be suspicious of anything that didn't smell. Absence became a signature. One courier wrote in his log, "Scroll bore no scent. Knew immediately it was authentic." Of course, this only worked because every other scroll was scented. If everything smells and something doesn't, it sticks out like a cracked bell. You ask Arif how many scent blends he keeps in his head. He sighs. 97 active formulas, 28 retired, 11 restricted by the palace. Then he points to a row of sealed jars lined up like tombstones. Those are the dead ones. Too strong, too dangerous, or too easy to copy. Saboteurs tried. Of course, Arif has a whole drawer full of samples he confiscated from counterfeit blends, some made with cheap substitutions, lemongrass instead of citronella. Others with regional errors like using Tamil clove oil for a Delhi document. The nose knows. Here's a fun twist. In one famous case, a forged scroll smelled almost perfect except the wax was made with ghee instead of tallow. On hot days, it melted in transit, revealing the tampering. The courier noticed it felt too soft, sniffed it, and cracked the whole spy ring. As you leave the perfumer's tent, you realize how deeply scent has soaked into this system, not just as a flourish, but as its infrastructure. Without the perfumers, the couriers are just gamblers. Without the scent code, the empire is flying blind. And as the last candle sputters out behind you, the smoke trailing like lazy handwriting across the roof, one thought lingers in your nose. The pen may be mightier than the sword, but the candle smells what the pen hides. You're back on horseback, the perfumer's tent shrinking behind you into a speck of color and smoke. Mazar doesn't say much. His thoughts are wrapped around the scroll again. He keeps checking the satchel like it might vanish or sprout legs and trot off. But really, it's not the paper he's worried about. It's the scent. Because every courier knows the story of what happens when you get the scent wrong. And tonight, under a dull gray sky and the creeping weight of humidity, that story rides alongside you. It happened a few years back. Courier named Farid. Talented. Careful. The kind of guy who could tell the difference between cinnamon bark cured in summer versus winter, blindfolded. He was assigned a scroll marked with a delicate blend rose oil and cumin dust, a combo used almost exclusively for minor diplomatic matters. Think small land disputes, border clarifications, the political equivalent of saying, please tell your goats to stop crossing the river. Anyway, Farid rode fast, too fast. He took a shortcut through a marsh, hit a patch of bad weather, and stopped at a checkpoint he didn't recognize. Just a man with a tent and a warm fire seemed friendly, gave Farid water, fed his horse, offered to dry the scroll near the fire. Here's the thing. The wax seal didn't melt, but the scroll baked, and with it, the scent, whatever had been subtle and official, now reeked of mint and burnt linen. Farid didn't notice his nose had gone numb from exhaustion. He made the delivery. The vizier at the palace sniffed it once, frowned, and asked, why does this letter from Gujarat smell like a bathhouse? Farid was detained on the spot. The message was declared tampered, and because the scent no longer matched any known formula, it was considered a forgery, a diplomatic threat. The actual message, a peace confirmation between two minor courts, but the consequences, a week of troop movements, a border clash. And poor Farid spent 3 months in a jail cell until his supervisor vouched for the fire damage theory. You don't forget a story like that. Neither did Majar. That's why, after 3 more hours of riding, he stops abruptly. You follow his gaze. He's staring at a cluster of smoke ahead, not sweet-scented wax smoke. This is darker, bitter, wrong. A checkpoint. Maybe, or maybe not. Mazar reins in the horse and dismounts slowly. He doesn't go straight to the smoke. First, he pulls the scroll from the satchel carefully, and opens the protective pouch. He holds it to his nose. Clove. Ajwain, slightly weaker now, but still present. Then he takes out his tester strip and sniffs it too. Same blend. So far, so good. But the smoke ahead keeps curling like a question mark. And you both know that a fake checkpoint is worse than no checkpoint at all. He moves forward slowly, scroll rewrapped, hand near the hilt of the knife tucked in his boot. The fire's small. A single figure tends it, crouched low. The man stands as you approach, tall, clean tunic, no courier mark on his sash. That's already a problem. Mazar doesn't speak. He just gestures to the man's incense burner. The man shrugs, lifts it, and waves the smoke toward Mazar. It smells floral, definitely not clove, a little musky, and under it all, something sharp, citrus, no orange blossom. Mazar takes a step back. You've heard this scent before. It's used only for royal invitations, summons to weddings or festivals, rarely burned outside the palace. So why is a random checkpoint worker using it to verify a revenue dispatch? Because he's not a checkpoint worker. Mazar narrows his eyes. Who sent you? He asks. The man smiles. Same people who sent you. Historians still argue whether false scent stations were state-sponsored counterintelligence or rogue operations. The empire was vast. not every scheme ran through the emperor's ears. Some theories suggest that rival governors used scent confusion as a form of political sabotage, planting fake checkpoints with false perfumes to discredit messengers. Others claim these were just opportunists, hoping to intercept royal scrolls for a price. Mazar doesn't wait to find out. He backs away slowly, then turns and mounts. You ride fast, no more detours, no more guessing, just hooves and wind. And the quiet, burning thought that someone tried to unmake a message using the wrong smell. It's a courier's nightmare, carrying the right scroll with the wrong scent. And it happens more often than you think. Sometimes it's environmental. Too much heat, damp air. One courier swore a field of blooming wild garlic near his route permanently ruined a dispatch that was supposed to smell like lilies. Sometimes it's sabotage, and sometimes it's just the nose, getting older, getting tired, losing track. That's why Mazar rides through the night. Because with every hour, the scent fades, and every breath takes it further from what it was meant to be. There's no reapplying, no re-scenting. You either deliver it while it smells like truth or don't deliver it at all. The next morning, as the sun cracks open the sky in pink and gold, Mazar crests a ridge overlooking the valley below. In the distance, the outline of the regional capital cuts against the haze. He doesn't stop. The scent is still there. Barely, but enough. By the time you reach the city gates, the scent has become a ghost of itself. Mazar knows it the moment he exhales. The richness of the clove has thinned into something like dust. The ajwan has gone bitter, too sharp, too lean. The edges of the scent still whisper what they once were, but the warmth is gone. It's like trying to remember a voice you haven't heard in years. Familiar, but empty. The guards at the entrance, draped in navy and silver, don't stop you. They see Mazar's sash, the courier's emblem embossed in wax over his shoulder pouch, and wave him through with tired, unquestioning nods. Couriers don't wait in lines. Couriers don't explain. Inside, the city is already humming. Iron hammers in the distance. Bells from a shrine. Merchants shouting over plums and parsnips. But as you pass, a strange silence follows. Eyes linger. People turn their heads. Not because of you, but because of Mazar's scent. It trails behind like something wounded. And even the townspeople, untrained noses and all, seem to sense that something's off. You cross 4 streets and duck beneath an archway of painted sandstone. A tall staircase waits at the end, coiling upward into the palace's record office. The steps are carved with the lines of poetry, verses from long-dead emperors about honor, speed, and the sacred trust of paper. Mazar doesn't read them. He just climbs. Inside, the scentmaster's assistant meets you before you've even knocked. She's young, sharp-eyed, and already sniffing before Mazar speaks. She wrinkles her nose. That scroll was Clove Ajwain. Mazar nods. Pulled from the North Archives. Dispatched 2 nights ago. Protected the entire way. Her brow furrows. It's faint, still intact. Barely. She doesn't accuse, not exactly, but her face does the math. Hours on the road. Exposure to wind. Maybe smoke. Maybe something else. She takes the scroll, turns it gently in her palms, then lifts it to her nose and breathes deep. Her verdict comes in a whisper. It's fading into cumin. That's not good. Cumin, while chemically adjacent to ajwain, carries entirely different bureaucratic associations usually related to debt collection, not land records. The scent shift could recategorize the scroll, delay its processing, or worse, lead to rejection. Mazar doesn't flinch. He just says, mark it. Delivered. Original scent classification confirmed by sender and courier. The assistant hesitates. You'll need to sign. He does. 3 times. Once for the scroll, once for the scent, once for the intended scent. This is how the Empire manages a problem it can't solve. Because no matter how hard they try, scents don't stay, they change. They betray you, and when they do, bureaucracy steps in with paperwork and signatures, trying to freeze time and ink where wax can't. You're ushered out while the scroll is sealed again, this time in a hardened lacquer, scentless and archival. It'll be stored in a subterranean vault, with climate control powered by wind funnels and buried clay chambers. The message will live on, but the scent, gone. As you walk the corridor outside, the assistant catches up. softer now. Your scroll wasn't the only one this week. We had a jasmine sandalwood delivery turned to lemongrass. Had to flag it for reauthorization. Whole trade agreement held up for 2 days. Mazhar just nods. Because he knows, every courier knows, this isn't a job where you win. It's a job where you don't lose. The best case scenario is that no one notices you at all. The scent arrives pure. The message arrives intact. And your name is nowhere on the record because success in this world is invisible. You leave the palace as the noon sun begins to burn. The wax on Mazhar's pouch is already softening. He touches it, quietly, presses the emblem flat again. You ask him what's next. He shrugs. Another dispatch. South this time. And then he adds something rare. A glance sideways, a pause in his step. I've got 3 scents in my nose now. Only one's real, not sure which. It's a courier's curse. You carry so many smells, for so many people, that you lose track of your own. You wonder if Mazhar remembers what fresh bread smells like, or his father's workshop, or the inside of his own house. Probably not, but you walk with him anyway. Past the horses, past the shade tents, past the children waving sticks and pretending they're scrolls, dueling in the street like paper knights. And for a second, just a second, the air smells sweet again. Not like clove, not like ajwain, but like something warm, something home. Mazhar doesn't notice. You do, because sometimes being the one who remembers is the only way the scent survives. You're back on the road again, but this time, you're not with Mazhar. You've drifted deeper into the tangled web of the Empire's hidden trades, shadow markets, and clandestine courts. And the scent in the air, it isn't sandalwood or clove or any of those polite palace-approved aromas. No, this time, it's thick with deception, resinous, smoky, and just a little off. You're walking through the back alleys of Agra's foreign quarter, where the traders speak 5 languages and the rugs are sold in whispers. Here, a new game is being played, one that even the emperor might not know fully, the game of scented espionage. Your guide, a man named Rafiq, who claims to have once perfumed a seal that fooled the Grand Vizier himself. You're skeptical. He smells like he bathes in patchouli and sharp vinegar. But the deeper you go into his cluttered apothecary, the more you see the truth in his dusty jars and faded notes. This, he says, holding up a tiny bottle with amber liquid, smells exactly like the clove ajwain blend used by tax offices in Delhi. Took me 6 months. You lean in. He uncorks the bottle. He's not lying. It's uncanny. Down to the bitter finish and warm undertone, you feel your body react, the trained part of your nose associating the smell with paperwork and formal scripts. And for a moment, you forget you're being fooled. That's how easy it is, Rafiq says, grinning. 1 bottle, 1 drop of vetiver to twist it, and a message becomes something else. You ask him how many people are doing this. He shrugs. More than you'd think, less than you'd fear. But the real question is, how many have gotten away with it? That's when it hits you. The idea that the Mughal Empire, so obsessed with scent-based verification, might have built a system so subtle, so brilliant. It was also ripe for manipulation. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread. Some say the scent twins, as they were called, were used by rival factions within the court to reroute messages, confuse assignments, even start small conflicts. Others believe it's mostly myth stories spun by perfumers like Rafiq trying to sell their alchemical wares. But as he shows you a scroll sealed in counterfeit wax, indistinguishable from the real thing, you're inclined to believe the worst-case scenario. I sold this formula to a Rajput courtier once, Rafiq confides, lowering his voice. He used it to rewrite a land decree, shifted 3 villages onto his cousin's estate. No one questioned it. Right scent, right seal. You blink. 3 villages, 1 scent. And suddenly, the whole system feels terrifyingly fragile. Of course, there were countermeasures. Imperial scent masters began logging chemical compositions in ledgers, tracking minute variations in wax blends, storing back samples for scent comparisons. You even recall one story of a nose tribunal. A council of 5 elite couriers brought in to smell competing scrolls and decide which was genuine. Still, it wasn't foolproof. Scent is memory. And memory is slippery. Even the best noses sometimes hesitate, especially when false wax is crafted so precisely it even mimics temperature decay and smoke signature. Back in Rafiq's shop, you watch him light a counterfeit candle made to smell like the emperor's personal dispatch, blend an intense trio of rose, cardamom, and honey dowd. The scent curls into the room like authority itself, regal, unmistakable, and yet it's not real. Scents don't lie, Rafiq says, tossing a pinch of saffron onto the flame. But people do. You ask him what stopped these practices, how the empire ever managed to rein in this invisible war of noses. He laughs. They didn't. They just started writing more. That's right. As the empire grew, more messages came with secondary verification visual markers, ink styles, even personal phrases known only to sender and receiver. The scent remained, but it became part of a trio of security layers: smell, script, syntax. You thank Rafiq and step back into the open air. The sun's high now, and the breeze carries the sharpness of cumin and dried lemons from the nearby market. For a moment, your nose feels overwhelmed, suspicious of everything, untrusting of even the sweet whiff of a passing flower vendor. Because now you know, the Mughal candle code wasn't just a way to protect messages, it was a battlefield. And in that battlefield, scent wasn't just memory or perfume. It was camouflage. It was a weapon. It was war, bottled in wax. And while some scrolls burned away forgotten, others changed the course of lives, lands, and legacies. All because someone knew how to blend a little more coriander into the candle mix. You don't even realize how long you've been walking until your sandals squish through a puddle and your toes curl against unexpected wetness. The monsoon has arrived, fat drops smacking down from a heavy sky, turning dust into mud and fragrances into chaos. You've arrived in this district of Malda, where the roads are little more than softened clay now. Curling through flooded paddies and partially submerged market stalls, you squint through the curtain of rain, and you can't help but think, this must be every courier's worst logistical nightmare. Because how do you deliver scent-coated scrolls when everything smells like wet dog and lightning? Turns out, you don't, not reliably anyway. This was the great seasonal loophole in the Mughal candle code system. For 4 months a year, the nose was useless, scents washed away, oils went rancid, wax congealed oddly, and the messages, well, they ended up relying on desperate workarounds. You duck into a palm leaf shack where a half-retired courier named Umar is drinking a thick, ginger-loaded tea. His robes are damp, his boots dripping, and yet he manages to look vaguely amused. Monsoons, when you learn who can actually read. He grunts, you raise an eyebrow. In the dry season, everyone sniffs and nods like experts. Come rain, they have to verify messages the old-fashioned way. He means the scribal notes, of course. Secondary seals, the specific brushstrokes, and the curious presence of what they called rain code tiny indents in the wax made with brass pins, embedded before the candle burned. 1 for royal, 2 for fiscal, 3 for military, that kind of thing. You stare at Umar's fingers knotted, bent, and still vaguely scented with dried turmeric. He grins, smells a luxury, ink sticks around. And yet, the empire had still tried to fight back. In desperation, imperial scent masters brewed thicker, oilier waxes during monsoon months. Beeswax mixed with resin, bear fat, even traces of hardened shellac, anything to keep the smell intact through the storm. One court directive even suggested storing messages inside hollow bamboo sealed with clay, with a candle stub placed inside and lit just before reading. The theory, the scent, momentarily revived by heat, would flare up one last time like the dying breath of authenticity. Historians still argue whether that bamboo method ever worked. Some call it poetic nonsense. Others claim it's documented in the merchant scrolls of Gujarat. But whether real or not, the mere attempt says a lot about how addicted the system had become to scent as a tool of power. And as you sit beside Umar, sharing his ginger tea and watching his goat chew soggy rags nearby, you begin to understand. Weather wasn't just an obstacle. It was a yearly saboteur, a test. He tells you stories of scrolls lost to mold, of seals smeared into unreadable mush, and one particular dispatch that arrived with such a fermented odor. They thought it was poison. Turned out, someone had stored it near pickled limes. Even the most loyal noses struggled during monsoon. The olfactory field notes from those months were filled with disclaimers like smelled vaguely of ash and regret, or might have been cinnamon, might have been mildew, but the couriers still delivered. You imagine them, cloaked in oilskin, squinting into the downpour, guiding horses through flooded gullies, trying desperately to protect a tiny roll of parchment wrapped in oily cloth and hope. There's a certain romance to it. Or maybe it's just the tea. Umar hands you a scrap of old linen, muddied, crinkled, and faintly marked. He asks if you smell anything. You lean in. At first, nothing. Then maybe a suggestion of pepper. Or is it just the stew bubbling outside? He shakes his head. See, even you can't tell. That one used to sing with saffron. Now it just wheezes. You ask what they did when all else failed. When even the rain codes and bamboo tricks couldn't save a message, he shrugs. Sometimes we guessed. And just like that, the illusion of perfect order collapses. Because even in this carefully constructed empire of scent and syntax, there were days when soaked couriers, shivering with fever, just sniffed and made their best call. Wrong guesses meant prison, right? Ones meant a warm fire and maybe a silver coin. You walk back out into the rain as dusk bleeds into gray. Around you, monsoon frogs are in full voice. The air heavy with water, rot and green, and not a trace of clove, sandalwood, or rose survives. Still, somewhere on the breeze, you catch the tiniest whisper of burnt wax. Maybe an old message just gave up its final breath. Or maybe your imagination soaked through too. Either way, you realize now, for all its elegance, the Mughal scent system wasn't invincible. It was human, flawed, weathered, and sometimes it drowned. You're standing under the last sliver of awning before the palace barracks, where the storms finally eased into a misty drizzle. The air smells of wet clay tiles, damp horsehair, and that earthy scent that rises from sun-baked ground when rain soaks it for the first time in weeks. Petrichor, they call it today. Back then, just the smell that ruins wax. But that smell also marked the start of selection season. And tonight, you're here to witness something unusual. A recruitment round not for soldiers or scribes, but for noses. Yes, noses. Not metaphorically, literally. Because by the mid-1600s, the Mughal Empire had developed what might be the strangest job ranking in the subcontinent. A courier nose cast. At the top, the Khushbu whale, the fragrant ones. A tiny elite trusted to verify scroll authenticity by scent alone. The path to that rank, brutal. You follow a group of recruits, boys, girls, even a few wiry older men into the open courtyard behind the postal training pavilion. A curtain is pulled aside. Inside waits a low table stacked with scent-coated wax slivers, rose, frankincense, turmeric, saffron, cardamom, and oddly wet hemp. One by one, they're blindfolded. The examiner, a stern woman with silver rings on every finger, lights a candle beside each wax stub, releasing just enough heat to let the scent bloom. And then the questions begin. Which scent was used for military orders under Jahangir? A pause. One recruit inhales deeply, blinks behind the blindfold, and whispers, cedar bark, with a trace of asafoetida. Correct. Next, which formula was reserved for private correspondence between wives of the emperor? A shaky voice tries jasmine. Wrong. That's too obvious. It was betel leaf with crushed fennel. A sharp clang signals failure. You flinch. But this isn't cruelty, it's precision. Lives could hinge on a misread scent. A wrong guess could cause a war, or worse, a missed dinner invitation from the emperor's mother-in-law, not worth the risk. You begin to realize this wasn't just a gimmick, it was a science, or at least an art disguised as one. In fact, some scent trainees were required to fast before major trials. Why? Because spicy food or illness could throw off their scent detection. Garlic was banned for a week. No fermented sauces, no scented oils on the skin. The nose had to be pure. Historians still argue whether these rituals improved accuracy or just added mystique to the process. Some liken it to the incense-reading monks of Tang, China, where scent was treated like scripture. Others suggest the Mughal couriers were the world's first olfactory data analysts comparing, matching, and storing chemical memory like living sensors. Either way, there was a strict hierarchy. At the bottom, Duan Dobas, the smoke washers, who handled generic errands. Their job was mostly grunt work, identifying fakes, carrying decoy messages, and sniffing spoiled scrolls, most washed out within a year. Above them, Sugant Pehechanaks, the scent verifiers, trusted, mid-tier workers who had demonstrated at least 15 scent identifications without error. These couriers often handled confidential business, estate records, and imperial tax scrolls, basically the boring but important stuff. And finally, at the top, the Kushbuwes, known in some districts as the Emperor's Nose. They carried the truly sensitive messages, military commands, marriage negotiations, pardons, threats. Some were even granted their own perfumers to prepare wax batches under exacting conditions. You meet one of them. Her name is Sarah, short, sharp-eyed, and slightly hunched from years of riding bent forward into wind and rain. Her nostrils flare slightly as she walks, like she's reading the world in invisible code. Frankincense, she murmurs. As a scribe walks past, he glances at her, confused. She smiles. He carried a budget amendment notice. For the southern provinces, you blink. How did you know? Sahra taps her nose. They always use frankincense for money. Masks the smell of panic. And just like that, the system begins to feel less strange. You start to see how this empire so vast, multilingual, and packed with intrigue would need ways to verify trust when words weren't enough. And how scent, fleeting yet personal, could serve as both lock and key. But not everyone accepted the nose rankings. Some courts in the Deccan Plateau scoffed at the idea. One Maratha emissary reportedly said, "If your scroll can't speak without perfume, perhaps it lies too sweetly." Others tried to replicate the system with little success. Wax mixtures didn't hold well in drier, windier regions, so while the nose cast flourished under the Mughals, it remained uniquely theirs. Sarah leads you to her satchel, shows you a rolled kit with 20 tiny wax samples, each labeled with scratch marks only she understands. They tried to copy this, she says, but scent, it's personal, like handwriting. You nod. You can't fake a nose. You're back on the road again, this time with Sarah. She doesn't talk much, just rides, upright, alert, every muscle trained to read the wind. The road ahead is flat, stretching like a ribbon of clay across fields of mustard and sugarcane. But her eyes are on the sky, her nose already working. There's ghee in the air, she says suddenly. You sniff. All you get is dust and your own questionable breath. She squints toward the trees. Someone's burning a sweet blend, either a wedding or a bribe. And you wonder, how many hidden stories has she decoded without ever opening a scroll? Because that's what today is about, not delivery, not training. Today, you're watching her intercept. The Empire had rules. Of course, you couldn't just stop any courier and sniff their satchel like a paranoid hound. But when a report came in, say, a scroll smelling like it was meant for the north but found heading west, the scent elite like Sarah were sent to investigate. She leads you to a small checkpoint post beside a dry stream bed. A lantern swings from the arch, creaking faintly. The scent here is faint but sticky. Warm wax, yes, but floral. Too smooth, too pretty for the route it's on. Inside, a younger courier is trying to look casual. His sash is crooked. His boots are clean. Too clean. Sarah steps forward and holds out her hand. No shouting, no drama. Scroll. He hesitates, then hands it over. She doesn't open it, just lifts it to her nose. The silence is heavy. Then she says, "Rose, myrrh, almond oil. This isn't yours." The young man swallows. "It was given to me at the eastern gate, sealed already." She cuts him off. "This blend is royal family only. It shouldn't leave the inner walls. And you're delivering it to a merchant." He stammers. "He said it was a marriage document for his daughter." "Liars, Rose," she mutters. You blink. That's a scent category. Sahra nods. Blends so sweet they make the message harder to question. Turns out, perfumers had names for everything. Liars rose, beggars saffron, bureaucrats camphor. They weren't just scents, they were warnings. She opens the scroll. Inside, a plea for land reclassification, a request to change a trade road's border so that tariffs would benefit a certain merchant guild. It even bears a forged insignia perfect, but meaningless without the correct scent. She doesn't arrest the courier, just logs it, stamps the scroll, compromised, and returns it to a wax-sealed box labeled with black paint. Verification failure. Scent misuse. Historians still debate whether these scent-based interceptions were justice or overreach. Some couriers accuse the nosecast of acting like secret police, sniffing out dissent with imperial impunity. Others claimed they were the last defense against a growing tide of forgery and internal sabotage. One quirky tale: a scent verifier once flagged a scroll because the almond oil used was too fresh. Turns out, the blend had come from a perfumer who just joined the palace, and his oils weren't yet aged enough to match official standards. The entire message was delayed while his source was interrogated. That's how precise it got. You ask Sahara if she ever got one wrong. She doesn't answer immediately. Then, once, during the famine year, I mistook smoke-damaged saffron for turmeric. It was an order for grain shipments. I flagged it as a minor account scroll. She stares ahead. 3 towns waited 2 extra days for rice. The pause sits between you like a second saddle. But she keeps writing. As night falls, you stop at a village square lit by lanterns and the gentle burn of dung cakes fueling stoves. The smells are wild and unfiltered onions, milk, clay, smoke. For a moment, the whole idea of scent codes seems absurd until you see her unpack her testing strip and check the wax of the letter she just received, one handed to her quietly by a courier in the shadows. This one smells wrong. Too clean. No spice. No base. Just bland candle and dry paper. A null scent. Sarah calls it. The courier claims it's urgent. She shakes her head. Null means interception. Someone's tried to strip it. Either they soaked the wax or reheated the parchment. She opens it. It's a military order, but the names are blurred. Ink lightly smeared, like it was tampered by steam. Probably someone tried to copy it, then resealed it, hoping the scent didn't matter. She sniffs again. Charcoal. Someone tried to mask it. She logs it, flags it. Scroll goes into the same black box. The box rides with her everywhere now. You can't burn them. You ask. She frowns. No. Each failed scent becomes part of the library. A library of errors, of missteps, of proof, because the Empire isn't just keeping scrolls, it's keeping lessons. You fall asleep that night under a sky lit faintly by stars and candle smoke. The fire smells like neem wood and ghee. You try to name every note. You fail. But Sarah, she's still awake, still listening, still smelling. Because someone has to be the nose the Empire trusts even when the Empire forgets what its own messages used to say. The days begin to smell different, less like cloves and cardamom, and more like dust, copper, and fading ink. You ride with another courier now, old Kausar, who insists on keeping every outdated scroll he ever delivered. His bag creaks with the weight of messages long expired. One day, they'll ask for these again, he mutters, patting the waxy stack like beloved pets. But truthfully, he's part of a dying breed. Because the candle code is unraveling. It doesn't go all at once. No dramatic bonfire of waxes. Just small changes that slip under the nose literally. It starts with paper. New kinds of imported parchment flood into the Mughal markets. Thinner, glossier, less absorbent. The scent doesn't stick as well. You burn a clove candle over one, and the smoke rolls off like perfume on marble. Useless. Then there's ink. A reform in the imperial mint leads to a shift in ink recipe cheaper. Yes, but now chemically reactive with certain wax blends. Suddenly, cinnamon-scented letters begin to smell like singed sugar. Military orders are confused with wedding announcements. Somewhere near Bengal, a cavalry unit reportedly marched to the wrong town because the scent of their orders had morphed mid-journey. Kausar snorts when you mention this. They should have sniffed the messenger, not the message. But the rot goes deeper. There's a new administrator in the north. Young, sharp-tongued, university-taught, believes in stamps, codes, and embossed foil, thinks scents are superstition disguised as logistics. So he bans the wax blending. Orders go out in unscented scrolls, sealed with a numeric cipher burned into the ribbon. No more perfumers. No more night trials with blindfolded couriers and cedarwood smoke. Just codes and paper. Khazar refuses. He gets demoted to special archive duties, which is a polite way of saying, sit in this corner and don't break anything. Still, he lights his candles. Sandalwood for personal letters, vetiver for petitions. He doesn't even have a route anymore, but he burns the wax out of habit. The scent clings to his fingers, his beard, his clothes. I won't let them forget, he whispers. Historians still argue whether this decline was inevitable. Some claim the empire simply outgrew the need for such organic systems. Others suggest it was a deliberate erasure, a top-down decision to scrub sensual memory from bureaucratic protocol. There's even a strange theory that scent-based messaging was too successful, that enemies began to reverse engineer Mughal scent codes. One whispered tale involves Portuguese spies bottling imitation emperor's rose wax and using it to intercept land treaties. Is it true? Who knows? But the fear was real. Security changed. So did time. New emperors came, some curious, some indifferent. You remember one particularly gloomy afternoon in Lahore when the latest ruler, Jahangir's lesser-known cousin, waved away an entire briefing because the scroll smells like soap. No one laughed. It wasn't funny. The perfumers disappeared. Two, some went into the fragrance trade. One opened a sandalwood boutique that sold nose of the empire oils to nostalgic nobles. Another became a matchmaker. Said her sense of smell helped identify compatibility based on breath and body scent. Only a few clung to the old ways. And among them, one stubborn woman named Uzma. You meet her on a balcony in Agra, overlooking the river where elephant processions used to march. She has 2 candles burning beside her, one cinnamon, one camphor. You ask why? She shrugs. One for what was Shrah's, one for what's left. She pulls out a letter written by her grandfather, a courier who once delivered scented scrolls to the Red Fort itself. The wax is crumbling, but as she warms it gently over the flame, you catch it. Just a breath of clove, faint, a memory. She lets you hold it. You feel that, she says. The parchment is soft, worn, but you feel something more, the ghost of precision, of a system so intimately tied to the senses, it could only work if people cared. That's what's vanishing. Not just the wax or the scrolls, but the patience to sniff. You spend the night with Uzma, listening to old courier songs sung low over tea, songs about spices, wines, and the fear of losing a message to the wrong hand or the wrong nose. One verse hits different. If the scent is wrong, I turn around. No horse too tired, no ground too dry. For every breath the message takes is breath I swear not to deny. By dawn, the candles are out, and so, it seems, is the age of scent. And then you blink, and you're back in the present day. The courier uniforms are polyester now. They wear Bluetooth headsets. They ride scooters, not horses. You watch one zip down a side street in Jaipur, a paper bag bouncing in his hand. Inside, lunch from a tandoori shop. No sandalwood, no scrolls, no ceremonial bow before the palace gates. But the scent is still there, faint, yes, but persistent. You wander into a tech expo, of all places, and find a booth labeled Olfactory Authentication Systems. It's glossy and cold, the type of exhibit lit by LEDs and manned by someone wearing a headset mic and too much cologne. But the moment you hear him say, scent-layered message encryption, your ears perk up like a squirrel who just heard the word acorn. Turns out, they're serious. Modern security firms have started experimenting with aromatic markers, micro-level scent coding, embedded in physical documents or smart packages. The pitch: a QR code can be forged, but the precise blend of coriander and smoked pine, that's harder to replicate. You lean in closer as the tech rep sprays a document with something from a tiny vial, pepper oil base. He explains, then we modify the upper notes with regional spice extracts. Each document smells slightly different. Only the receiver knows what it's supposed to smell like. He's grinning like he invented it. You don't have the heart to tell him he's about 400 years late to the party, but you smile politely. He probably wouldn't believe you anyway if you started talking about old Kausar and the Emperor's wax trials. Still, it's a strange comfort, like finding an old melody you thought was lost, only now it's played on a synthesizer. Historians of the digital age have started noticing, too. One paper published in a respected journal you can't remember the name of claims there's a resurgence in scent-based encryption, especially in countries where smell carries deep cultural weight. Iran, Morocco, parts of India. One paragraph speculates that the Mughal candle couriers may have unintentionally pioneered this field. Another counters that there's no direct lineage, just parallel reinvention. Of course, historians still argue whether scent encoding counts as true cryptography or just an elaborate aesthetic. But you know better. You saw how Uzma warmed that wax, how Kausar lit that clove candle even in retirement. How blindfolded recruits learned to smell lies. You feel it in your nose before your brain catches up. The way memory holds onto a smell long after it forgets a face. Later that week, you stroll through a boutique perfumery in Delhi. The shelves are lined with essential oils in tiny glass bottles. The labels read like ancient poetry. Night rain, ink and iron. Rose archive, amber quill. You pick one up. Cinnamon envoy. The shopkeeper, a spry woman with sharp eyes, nods approvingly. That one's inspired by the imperial messengers, she says, like it's no big deal. They used to scent scrolls to prevent forgery. You ask her where she learned that. She shrugs. My grandfather told me, said his grandfather smelled letters for a living. You pause. You buy the bottle. Back in your hotel room, you light a candle and drizzle a single drop of cinnamon envoy onto the wick. The scent blossoms warm, spicy, with a faint whisper of smoke. Suddenly, your whole body remembers the bazaar, the palace scrolls, the nose-training tents, and the perfumer's secrets. It's all there. You laugh quietly, out loud, alone. The kind of laugh that's mostly exhale. The past is funny that way. It vanishes like steam, but the smell lingers. Later still, as you scroll through your phone in the half-dark, you come across an article titled Olfactory Forensics and the Future of Smell-Authored Documents. You don't click it. You already know, because somewhere in that sterile lab, or maybe in that glossy expo booth, there's a young inventor who thinks he's discovered something brand new. But it's just candle wax and cloves, dressed up for the 21st century. He'll learn. They always do. And maybe, just maybe, someone will one day open a scroll, sniff lightly, and smile, because something smells familiar. You wake up on your last morning in the city with the scent still hanging in the folds of your shirt. Something between cinnamon, dust, and old paper. It's not overpowering, not theatrical, just present, like an old friend waiting patiently for you to finish packing. Outside, the streets hum with the usual chaos. Horns, vendors, a fruit cart bumping along the curb. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning incense, and for a split second, it smells like the Emperor's dispatch. You smile, not because the scent itself matters, but because someone, somewhere, still lights it. Before heading to the airport, you stop by the post office, not one of the sleek, modern courier companies, but the old colonial structure with the red door and creaky floors. Inside, the clerk barely looks up when you ask if you can send a scented message. He just shrugs and points to the side desk. There's a little wax heater there, and a stack of blank scrolls. You don't ask questions. You don't need to. You choose Sandalwood. Not because it's your favorite, but because it reminds you of Uzma's balcony. The clerk seals it with surprising care. No barcode, no digital receipt, just ink, wax, and your handwriting. You don't even remember what you wrote. It doesn't matter. The message is in the smell. As you walk out, there's a child nearby playing with a stack of old coins. He's tossing them like stones against the wall. One bounces and lands at your feet. You hand it back. And as you do, you notice the scent on his fingers. Clove. You don't ask. Some things are better left mysterious. Maybe he just finished chewing a piece of spiced gum. Maybe he comes from a long line of couriers who never really stopped sniffing the world for secrets. As your plane lifts off, the city below shrinks into an intricate quilt of memory, one stitched together, with candle smoke and worn leather satchels. And that's where we leave it. With the ghost of an empire hiding not in grand ruins or marble palaces, but in something as fragile and persistent as smell, you lean your head back against the seat. The hum of the engine becomes a lullaby. Your nose twitches. The last hint of cinnamon curls toward your mind like a story retold by firelight. And just like that, you're home again. In a world where couriers chased perfume trails across deserts, where emperors trusted noses more than seals, where a blindfold could sharpen loyalty, where scent didn't just carry messages, it was the message. A world both lost and, perhaps, never truly gone. Now the candles burned low, the wax has pooled, the scent has softened into nothing but memory, quiet and slow, like fog curling against ancient stone. You've wandered far tonight, across borders, across centuries, from palace gates to courier camps, from jasmine-slicked scrolls to digital labs dreaming of old secrets in new packaging. You've walked beneath the clove moon and stood beside messengers who listened to the wind and read history with their noses. And here you are, still breathing, still catching hints of cinnamon on the air that might only be your own sleepy thoughts curling into dreams. Let the noise of the modern world fade now. Let the sound of hoofbeats grow distant. No more riders, no more scrolls, no more secrets to decode. Just the memory of wax, of oil warmed between fingertips, of perfumers whispering to blindfolded recruits in the dark, of a message sent not by ink or voice but by the strange, tender precision of scent. You did well, you listened. And now it's time to let go. So close your eyes. Let your body grow heavy. Sink back into the quilt of centuries. And if the breeze tonight carries even the faintest trace of rose or cedar or clove, know it's just a courier, riding silently by, honoring the old ways. One last time. Sleep gently. The message has been delivered.